the terminology of the HANA data modeling. All the participants with the organizer access can start the recording once the trainer shares the screen. You can start the recording. With the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, you will have option once you have the organizer access to click on Start Recording. And if you have to reconnect, it could sometimes happen that there could be certain audio disconnect or certain video disconnect. So sometimes we have to reconnect to reset our internet connectivity for the meeting, for the training. So if you have to reconnect, you can go out of the GoToMeeting and join again. But when you have to leave the meeting, please select Exit Leave Meeting, and this will allow you to just leave the meeting and reconnect again. But do not select End the Meeting. So if you select End the Meeting, it will close the meeting training for everyone. We'll have to restart the training again, right? So as we are organizer, as we have the organizer access, you will be able to control the meeting. You will be able to chat between the participants. You will be able to directly chat with the trainer, and you will also be able to share your screen if you have technical difficulties, and likewise. But when you have to reconnect, please click on Leave Meeting and not End the Meeting if you have to reconnect. Okay, so that's a short notification for all participants with the organizer access. Start. We are at the system. You can log on into the system shortly after an hour or so, but for now we will check in the system the existing definition, terminologies, and few other process flow with BODS. So you can log off from the remote computers and focus here on the screen being shared. After an hour and a half or so, you can log in and you can start with a practice, or you can share your screen, and likewise. So yesterday, a quick recap on what we learned in the HANA Studio was in regards with the SLT, the SAP Landscape Transformation. So that was a starting point for how we use the standard tool of HANA for SLT replication. Tonight we will learn about the other tool from Business Objects, SAP Business Objects, Data Services. Plus, we will also be able to summarize the difference between SLT and BODS. Okay, I have a participant with no audio. Let's check the audio before we start. Audio check to all. Okay, so if you have audio problems or not able to see the screen refresh, please reconnect. It sometimes happens due to the network overload at this time. We can use the chat box if you have questions in between. You can share your questions or doubts in the chat box. As we are using GoToMeeting, there will be no questions box or click on raise hand in this tool, but we use the chat box for question answers. You can directly post a question to the trainer or post to everyone so that the rest of the participants are aware of your questions. Connected with the telephone line, it is advisable to switch over to the computer speakers and microphone. Sometimes the PIN code being sent out by the team, well, most of the case it works if you're using a telephone line, but it is better to convert or switch over to the computer speakers if possible. Okay, so we're ready to start. We go here into the studio and we'll have a quick recap on what we have done yesterday from an overview standpoint. So yesterday in session 2, we were able to check as an overview on the catalog folder, which comprises of a series of schemas. And we know so far that a schema is a container which contains the database objects like tables. There could be a SLT schema, which is derived from the SLT replication, as we have seen yesterday, that if you're using an SAP landscape transformation or the SLT replicator, the schema name which is configured there arrives in here in HANA as a target schema. So in our example, we were using the ERP1 schema, in which we were able to load a table for our example. And table, once we get loaded, we will be able to see the content. So in order to reconfirm, let's go here into the data provisioning. And check the list of the tables that are getting replicated and that are getting scheduled that have been already loaded in here in this target schema being defined. The target schema being defined is ERP1 and is extracting the data from EH5, the source. And if you go here onto the left-hand side of the screen, you will be able to see here on the left-hand side the ERP1 schema. So a schema is a container for the SLT, in this case, SLT schema for tables to get stored and the data in that table to be available, collected in that schema. All right? Okay, so we have these SAP ERP tables getting replicated. Now, yesterday I had one of my consultants asking, we have an SAP CRM system, a CRM system, Customer Relationship Management System, which is running on Oracle. Can we use SLT? Answer is yes. All SAP sources can connect to HANA through SLT. Now, if you have a non-SAP source like a Teradata or a mainframe systems or a Hadoop system or other non-SAP systems or DBMS or DBMS, in those cases we use BODS. So we'll write down those points and maintain session notes. Once the table gets loaded here, then we'll be able to check the contents. If some of you may have practiced with the Excel flat file loading, you would have been able to see the data preview. The step on how we run a data preview is to select the table. In our example, we've loaded the KNA1 table yesterday. After the data gets loaded completely, we click here or right click and select Open Data Preview from the context menu. When you do so, you'll be able to see the contents of that table. This is a data preview and not the complete list of all of those records. It is just a data preview. So we're looking at 5,000 rows at a data preview. We can of course increase and decrease the number of rows for the data preview in the preferences. We will see how we do that shortly. But now here in the data preview, we've got 3 different tabs. A row data, a distinct values, and then the analysis tab. Please practice on data preview and have a quick exploration after the session. So the row data will give us the complete list of all of the values, whether we have blank values, null values, or special characters. It will try and show all of those together here in the row data. And then in the distinct values tab, we will be able to see the distinct count. And the analysis tab is what the end user or the reporting user would like to visualize for ad hoc reporting and how the values will show up at the reporting layer. For example, yesterday we were trying to count the number of customers per country, and here we are. We can select further sub-tabs to check the values in the chart or a tabular display or a grid layout or kind of an HTML preview. So the first thing is to replicate the table values into HANA, making sure that the data that we want to use for data modeling is already available in HANA, whether we extract using a flat file extractor, like the simple example that we've done yesterday, or use the SLT, or use the BODS. Yesterday we had a couple of questions regarding what if we want to apply certain filters? What if there are some additional rules that have to be applied before we replicate the data into HANA? The answer lies in the SLT ABAP programs. But before we go into those details, let's highlight the right-hand side of the screen. As you can see, there are multiple options to perform and manage the data loading in SLT. The first push button here is the load. And we were able to load yesterday a table for KNA1. Load is the initial load. The initial load implies that if you have a, for example, a 5 years data set, you completely load the 5 years data set, and then once the 5 years data is completely loaded, full load is performed, then onwards you'll be able to replicate, to open that connection or to open that SLT replicator for future deltas or future change records, whichever is saved and committed at the source. So the difference between a load and a replicate is that a load will perform a full initial load and the replicate will enable the deltas or the change records. The replicate is only executed after the load is completely successful. The third push button over here, stop replication, is very less frequently used. Stop replication. The stop replication is only required in a scenario or in some scenarios where if the end user specifies that a table which we have replicated is no longer required for the reporting, or that a table we were replicating is no longer required for any data models. So if a table is not required, then we can stop replication of that table, delete the table after dropping the values of the table. So this is only in those scenarios where if the table or the respective data models from that table are no longer required in the reporting, in the project, in that scenario, or in HANA. Then we delete after we stop the replication. If you happen to stop a replication of that table or a group of tables, then we have to restart the complete load if the business comes back again saying we require the tables again in those scenarios, for example. Yeah. So if you stop, or if you happen to stop the replication, you'll have to start all over again to load and then to replicate, which may take some time to restore that table that we have deleted or to restore that table that we've stopped the replication. So in SP03 onwards, we are at SP08, right? So in SP03 onwards, in SP03 support pack level 3 of HANA, there was a couple of customers who were requiring to not stop replication and start all over again. So they were looking for an alternative approach from SAP. Customer Intel and customer Bayer and the customer Adobe were initially using the SLT. We're looking for an alternative solution on how we can temporarily hold the replication or temporarily pause the replication and then resume if required in the future, so we don't have to reload the table all over again. So we see here suspend and resume, push buttons. The suspend will pause. When you click this, select the table, will pause the replication of a table or a group of tables in SLT. So when you pause the replication, all of those deltas or change logs which are created at the source get temporarily stored in the SLT replication server, and later if you want to resume the data loading, we click here on resume and the deltas are all restored from the delta queue from the SLT replication server. So we don't lose any deltas in this process, number one. Number two, we don't have any disruptive process maintaining the table load management if you have stopped the replication, for example. So instead of stopping entirely a table load, we can suspend or pause the replication and then resume at a later point of time. So a scenario example could be that a user comes over to your HANA team and asking, hey, we don't need this table for now. And we're waiting for a confirmation from the corporate users that we will be still using the reports from the table or not. So hold on for 3 days or a week, for example. So in that time, you can suspend or pause the replication. And if any deltas happen to be created at the source, it gets temporarily queued in the SLT replication server. And then the business comes back to the HANA team saying, hey, we require the table again. You just come back here and click on resume, and the non-disruptive flow of deltas continues. So this feature was identified and proposed in SP03 of HANA. In SP04, it was globally available for customers using SLT replication server. So today in SP08, we have stopped using stop replication. Instead, we use pause, meaning suspend, and then resume later if we have a confirmation. The last button here is the jobs. The jobs are those batch jobs which could originate from the SLT server through an ABAP program, custom jobs of data loading, or custom jobs which are created here in the HANA using SQL procedures or functions. But they are not frequently used because these jobs, although they are a feature available, it's not used very frequently because we already have standard proven replicators of SLT and BODS. However, if there is any need to have a custom data flow with a logic written in HANA, you can use the jobs. But those control logics and custom coding are much more and far effective if you use BODS custom programs. As far as SLT is concerned, there are a few areas of changing the data loading flow in SLT ABAP programs. So, to understand how it works, we will open a slideshow first to understand the background. If you are an ABAPer, it will help you. So I'm trying to open the slideshow for consultants with ABAP programming experience, or for those consultants who are looking at custom coding using ABAP if you want to conduct or perform any ABAP-based transformation rules or change of the table structure or apply filters in the SLT programs and so forth. So I will switch over to the slideshow. Okay, so I believe the slides are open and available on the screens. The SLT, which is also commonly referred as LT replication, is a project component which is owned by SAP, or which is led by SAP. So if you have a customer that says that, hey, we're using SLT for HANA replication, you can already identify that project is owned by SAP or their SAP partners or led by SAP themselves. In that case, we will have less authorization to maintain, monitor, repair SLT or create custom programs in SLT ABAP systems. However, this is a out of the certification component, and this will give you an additional insights, although we will not be authorized to work in here in real-time projects, but this will give you additional insights on how to customize SLT data loading if required using ABAP programs. So we start with slide number 2. Yep. So we see here the complete process flow of the SLT, how it is installed and how it is available in the landscape between the source and the target, and what are the components that are available here in SLT. The first component is the SAP Solution Manager, which will act as a server between the source and the target. The SAP Solution Manager is provided as a free-of-cost system for maintenance and audit for any SAP installation-based customers. So even for HANA, you'll have a Solution Manager available where you can use the system server as an SLT replication server. Or the customer may use another third-party servers with the SLT programs for SLT replication. The next point is a zero downtime at the source. So we don't have to bring down the system or put a downtime or close or block user transactions when the setup or initial load are going on. Here in SLT HANA replication, the business goes on as usual, and we can have a near zero downtime and perform the replication parallel. The SLT from yesterday's session comprises of the DMIS, D-M-I-S. This is a basis packet which comprises of a series of SLT ABAP programs that ensures the SLT is able to read, process, and send or write data into HANA. The DMIS primarily comprises of series of SAP standard ABAP programs and plus the TDMS. The TDMS stands for Test Data Migration Server, and it's extensively used by the administrators to perform system copy, client copy. Yep, so that particular component is used again here in the SLT along with the DMIS software from SAP to enable SLT for HANA data loading. From a graphical visualization, this is how it's going to look like. We will have a source, we have a target, and in between we have the replicator server. This is SLT replicator server. The SLT replication server will have a series of ABAP DMIS programs and controlled by the TDMS, of course, and then you have SLT available for HANA. The installation configurations are performed by the hardware vendors for that customer. Now, once the SLT replication server is installed with the appropriate DMIS packets, appropriate TDMS, appropriate other third-party softwares and host agents, then an RFC connection is built between source and the replication server to be able to connect. And then a DB connection is created between that replication server and the HANA so that both the source and targets are connected, and then the ABAP software programs will be able to perform read of application tables. So you see here read modules, will read all of those application tables, master data tables and transactional tables, table by table together, and also read from the log tables if we need to bring in deltas. So after reading, it sends the data outbound into the SLT replication server where the controller modules, another series of ABAP program, pre-process portion by portion of the data that is arriving here from the source. Then the write modules start writing the data forward into HANA application tables. This is the complete process flow. Now let's have a look into the steps on how the hardware vendor administrators configure the SLT. Yesterday, if you remember, we've gone into a special administrator transaction code for the SLT, which was LTR. If some of you remember, this is a T code which is executed by the hardware vendors with the administrator rights to be able to configure SLT for the first time. And the screens are as follows here. Step number 1, go into LTR transaction code and create a configuration schema. The schema that is created here will arrive into HANA as an SLT-derived schema where all the SLT replicated tables are stored in HANA in that SLT schema. Next, step number 2, the hardware vendor administrator then gets the confirmation from SAP on how many number of jobs will be used, or the replay jobs will be used in that SLT. So the jobs are defined by the number of ABAP programs or modules that are activated by the SAP and their vendors or partners for SLT configuration. Then they provide the RFC connection name, which is created by the basis administrator between the source and the replication server. Then the HANA administrator provides the service user ID, which will be used in the backend for all the intercommunication between source and the target HANA system. So they provide the user, administrator, password, the host name, and then the instance number. The next information area here is the table space assignment. The table space assignment is to be left as blank. Reason being that this table space assignment is created for the temporary storage of all the deltas in a particular queue whenever we suspend or pause the replication from HANA Studio. So what happens when you click on pause or suspend? The deltas, whichever are saved at the source, are temporarily collected here in these table spaces, data class 1, 2, and 3. We don't put any number here because if, for example, if you put here 30, the unit of measurement of this table space allocation is in megabytes, MB. So if you put here 30 in all these three, data class 1, 2, and 3, it will have a total capacity of 90 megabytes, 30 plus 30 plus 30. And if it increases beyond 90 megabytes, then it will ignore the deltas. So we don't put any number here, we just leave it blank. So dynamic allocation takes place. If you're wondering where it is connecting from, let's go out of the slideshow, go back into the HANA Studio, and then come back here in this option for suspend and resume. Okay, so onto the right-hand side here, in the suspend and resume, there is a option that when you click here on suspend, automatically the trigger will hold for those tables that have been suspended, and if any deltas are created, during the suspend, then the table space which are shown here will be able to store those deltas in this table space 1. So if 1 is filled, it goes to 2 and 3, and the 3 gets written, filled, go back to 1, 1 is cleared and stored into the live cache of the SLT replication server. So this is how a small control happens if you click on suspend until you click on resume. And when you click on resume, the delta queue will open up here from the table space and start sending the deltas without losing single deltas from SLT. This is not part of the certification examination, but it will help you get the insights of what really happens in this configuration done by the vendor. Then, of course, replication option, whether you want to run a real-time, schedule it by interval, every 2 hours, 1 hour, or schedule by time of the day, every midnight, schedule the job. So these are some of the important pre-activities performed by the hardware vendor for that customer before SLT gets fully functional. After that, step number 3, the hardware vendor tests load tables, and step number 4, check data provisioning, and then perform the loading from the HANA Studio, and that's how they check, and then they deliver or hand over the SLT server to the customer. And then we come in as a consultant to proceed further with data loading table by table if we're using SLT. Likewise, BODS separately performed simultaneously. Now, in SLT projects for HANA, if you are an ABAPer or an ABAP programmer, or if you're a consultant working with ABAP objects, dictionary objects, there is a additional skill set that you can develop with ABAP programs if you want to work in that field. SAP HANA it offers a lot of opportunities for a lot of consultants, for ABAPers, for data warehousing consultants, for report writers, for security consultants, for functional or business analysts, for a application consultant, or for ETL consultants for data loading, and likewise administrators. One of the opportunity here is to handle transformation capabilities in SLT with ABAP. The transformation capabilities are sometimes required and requested by the customer, asking, hey, we have these tables and we want you to concatenate these values together before data arrives into HANA. How do you do it? With a ABAP program. If you're using SLT. If we're using BODS, is something else. So here in the SLT, if there is any need to filter out the values or to append the source table structure or add a new field, remove a new field, or concatenate or perform conversions of the currency conversions before data arrive into HANA, those activities are performed in the replication server before the data arrives into HANA. So in this example, we will look into, this is not related to the certification, but it will be related to interviews, if any. All right, so let's look into this example here. And what we see here is a conversion of data is a first example. The scenario given here on the left-hand side, it indicates there is a HR reporting, and then you will require to fill certain initial values. So sample examples given here, and the steps given to the right-hand side. The step number 1, is to create the ABAP program as an include type, and then maintain that ABAP program, test it, develop it, and if everything is okay, then you include that ABAP program here in the assignment rule mapping table, IUUC. Remember the IUUC star programs that we've checked yesterday quickly as an overview? Yep. So those IWC is a standard prefix for any SLT related programs or SLT related tables. One of the primary tables are listed here, IUUC assignment rule mapping table. Step 3, of course, is to start the load from Studio after the conversion is tested. So the data processing looks something like this. We have a source, we have a target, and we have the replication server in between. In here, you'll have the ABAP program for the control logic. The control logic is where you apply the algorithm or the logic of the business transformations or filtering data or likewise any conversions. Alright, so you'll have multiple loops. For example, here start the replication cycle written in the include ABAP program, and then portion by portion you split, and then for every portion you perform the field-to-field mapping, the multiple events, before, after events that you can control if you're an experienced ABAPer. In HANA ABAP, there are two types of transformation rules. One is an event-based, and the other is a parameter-based. So when you create your ABAP program as an include type, you can assign on how the logic will be executed, whether as an event-based or a parameter-based. For an ABAPer or ABAP consultant or ABAP developer, depending upon the complexity of the data sets, depending upon the pre-processing, post-processing, and the complexity per portion with the volume of data, we decide whether we want to have an event type based rules or a parameter type based rules. An event based will be used generally if you have higher volume of data to be transformed, a higher complexity of data to be transformed, and if you have a larger logic to be implemented together within loops. So we go with the event-based. On the other hand, the parameter-based are used for a smaller portion of data, less complex data sets, and for small change or small loops. Now, in the assignment rule mapping table, the table name given here, these are the fields. And you'll have to create your ABAP program in a particular naming standard, have it tested, and then include the ABAP include program here in assignment rule mapping table in this include parameter field. Remember that it is only event-based or a parameter-based, and not both of these two together in the same transformation mapping. So whether you select an event or a parameter, but not both these two in one program. This is only for ABAPers or consultants who will be advising and assisting the ABAPers for their SLT HANA data loading with transformation rules. The events are as follows in here in this slide. Left hand side will give you the construct of how the program structure will look like. The right hand portion of the screen will have the events definitions. So you have begin of the processing, begin of the block by block, begin of the loop, and then begin of the record by record. So this is the begin portion where you can declare, initialize, pre-process, and perform the initial activities. And after that, for each begin, you'll have an end. So you have a begin of processing, likewise end of processing, end of the block, end of the loop, end of the record by record mapping. So there are 8 types of events if you count, 4 begin and 4 end. So you have 8 types of events. So accordingly you decide on how the program structure would look like, and then which event to be used. On the other hand, for smaller data sets and for less complex data sets transformation, we use parameter-based. There are 3 input parameters. You see here param 1, param 2, and 3. If you have maintained reusable variable literals, you can reuse those. And the output parameter is just 1, which is the field name in the assignment rule mapping table. Let's look at the screenshots. This will help the ABAP consultants, ABAP HANA consultants, or HANA consultants who are assisting ABAPers. So you first start with a transaction code AC38 in your SLT system for testing or creating your program first. And remember that it has to be an include type ABAP program, because you're going to include that in the assignment rule mapping table. Then here, once you go into that table, IUUC underscore assignment underscore rule underscore mapping table, then you put in those details. For example, if it is an event, you put the event ID, BOR, BOP, BOL, BOT, likewise. Begin of record, begin of processing, begin of the loop, and begin of the record, or end of record, end of block, end of loop, likewise. So for that particular event, you have to include the ABAP program in here in this include field. You can follow a naming standard, and the logic is shown here for a sample example. All right, let's move into the next slide. For the parameter-based, so we have parameters sent in here as a dummy value, and the include program given in here, and the logic as a changing the field with XXX, for example. So if you observed, you will see that either it is an event-based or a parameter-based, and not both together. So you see when if it is parameter, events are blank. And when it is an event-based, the parameters are blank. The slide will be available after the session. Next example is what if the customer end user or the SAP customer end user is asking the HANA team and the developer consultants that, hey, we require this table structure with the new field at the source. Right? So they can use that table at the source for other purposes. So there could be some instances of scenarios or business examples where the table structure need to be appended or extended at the source. So the steps are as follows. If you need to enhance the table structure or append the table structure at the source, you go into the table definition, of course. You should have the authorization to append structure of that table. In this example, we're using ZIUCEX2 target example, and we are appending this table with a new field, amount in euros. So this table has got the client number, partner number, material number, name one and other details. It's got a transaction currency in dollars, and they want to change or convert that into euros and then still retain that field at the source. So we are looking at two things in one example. One is to perform currency conversion, and the two is to also append the table with the new field and restore it at the source. Later we replicate this table into HANA. So append the structure of the table at the source, step 1. Step 2 is to arrange for an ABAP program to populate, if required, that new field values should start coming in from this time or from this company code or from this material numbers likewise. And step 3 is to maintain the assignment for the table structure. Step number 4 is to go with the ABAP program, whether it is an event-based or a parameter-based. In this example, we have for every record by record when it begin of record, the program given here and the logic given here. So they're trying to pick up that if that field currency equals dollars, then you multiply that by 1.5 as a fixed code. Of course, the programmer can read from the foreign exchange table, and likewise here we're using a fixed code, 1.5 multiplied into dollar, and then we see euros in this example. Likewise, for the parameter-based, and then the replication starts from HANA, and then you'll be able to see two fields. One is the currency amount in the dollar for the amount field, and then the new field, which is amount in euros, multiplied by 1.5. So this will give you an insight, although they're not part of the certification examination. This will give you an overview what really happens in the back end, and it opens up the opportunity for the ABAPers that, hey, there's an area that you can come in here and perform custom coding, control logic, and any changes working on ABAP for HANA SLT replications. Next example is filtering of records. In this example, there is a table, and they want to pick the table only the condition filter where it equals to Y, meaning active value field from that table. And step number 2 is to check the table contents, table definition. Yep. So we see here in this example that there is a field which is AS4 local, where this field maintains the activation status of the object. If it is Y, it is active. If it is not Y, meaning N, then it is not active. So in this example, the replication scenario is to only filter the Y values and not the N values, only the active fields. Logic is written in the ABAP program, and for that event or for that parameter-based logic given here, and then to extract the Y field. So it says it's not equals to N, meaning equals to Y, so you pick up that value. So filtering the values before the data completely arrives into HANA. So we only filter selective data loading done here in this ABAP program. All right. So that's what really happens in the SLT. It requires a series of ABAP programs, series of control logic to work with a series of trigger ABAP programs and so forth in the SLT. Remember, SLT is part of HANA package, and it is prescribed for SAP customers. So the next part that we will look into is working with BODS. Before we work into the BODS, I will be maintaining a session note here. In this notepad, I will write down some important points for all of you so that you can keep it for your future reference. So what have we found out in SLT is that there are certain manual activities or manual steps that have to be performed for load, replicate, stop, replicate, etc. And then to work with ABAP programs manual steps. Plus, we had a question from yesterday that what if you load a table, does the table get loaded with other linked tables? Answer was no. So it's important that the SLT consultant for HANA who is performing the replication of that table should be aware of the table relationship. So it's only tables here. What if you want to run an extractor loading? Not possible in SLT, right? So we Check audio check. Check audio check. If you guys can hear me, can anyone make me a presentator? All right. I think we're back. I think I lost the audio from my end. I'm not sure where, but I was trying to speak and then I got this comment it's not able to hear, so I had to reconnect the audio. This could sometimes happen because we all connected using different networks, using our off sometimes. There could be certain interruptions in the communication. Okay, so since we are back, we will continue in the session notes that was written down. We've written down here that the SLT requires certain manual steps. And we're trying to learn into the bots, the BODS, how BODS is much more effective in handling data loading and in handling data loading repairs and any remediations if required for the data loading. BODS is a separate license for the customer, and for the consultant is a separate certification course. But we will look into the BODS from a HANA standpoint and be able to see how, what, and where the BODS come in handy for HANA data loading with selective data loads and various other changes. Okay, so we go in here. And to open up the data services, we go into the system, click here on Start. Then you'll be able to click here on All Programs and then select SAP Data Services 4.2. The SAP Data Services 4.2 is the latest version of the data services BODS. And today it's called as SAP DS and not BODS anymore. All right, so we select this Data Services Designer, and the rest of the other links are used by the Data Services Administrator, the BO Enterprise Administrator likewise. All right, so we're going to select the Data Services Designer, and this is a separate license for the customer. Some customers may have already implemented BODS, so they may want to leverage the license Connect with HANA. So provide your user ID and the password and log on. So when you try and log on, you will be requested to select the repository into where you want to work. So repository is kind of a work area for a developer in BODS. Select the repository and provide the password. I believe that's the same password. Just hold on. Okay. The passwords to the repository is so in BODS when you log on for the repository password is in lower caps DS Data Services REP repository. I will be sending this session notes notepad. So enter into that repository and provide the repository password, and then you will see the landing page of the data services. What we have here on the left hand is the project area. This is where you create project folders, and then you will have the data loading jobs, data flows, workflows, query transformation mapping, etc. A HANA application consultant is expected to have some awareness on BODS today. Some level of awareness on how it really works and how to create a job and how we connect the mapping, etc. BODS, you will have separate BODS extraction ETL consultants, separate BODS certified developers. Plus, if you are a senior consultant or a solution architect, you're expected to have some awareness on DS. So we're looking into here from a HANA standpoint. So the upper left-hand box is the project area. We're going to create a project. Then the next box below the project area is the library where you can have access to these cross tabs according to the authorization granted by the BODS administrator to the developer. The primary screen here, it says about, gives you the details about getting started. And you can open a project which is already created, activated, or create a new project, or have access to certain data stores to create those, import from file, or look into the central repositories or central work areas. In BO, meaning in BODS here, in Business Objects, there are 3 repositories: a local repository, a global repository called a central repository, and a profiler repository to handle security authorization of that developer profile. Then you also have a management console for checking data services jobs which are getting loaded, which are on hold, all of those in here for the data services administrator. Then in the lower portion of the screen you get multiple links for access to the public domain about the released notes given by SAP to the community, data services community, where you can share your use cases, etc. You can also understand certain use cases, the blueprints and the forums for technical operations, technical manuals for developers, and tutorials for beginners. Okay, we have not yet started working in HANA, but it is important that we have an awareness about these 2 tools, SLT and BODS, to be able to acquire data, bring data into HANA. Okay? So let's start on to the steps. We will first create a new project. All right, so let me pull down this box a little bit here, and then let's create a new project. New project. So I'm going to give a project name here. For example, we are in December HANA bots load. Yep, just giving a project folder name, create. So you got this folder available here, and then we're going to right-click and select from the context menu the job. A batch job is to run scheduled jobs of data loading, whereas a real-time job is for real-time replication services. Although a batch job can also be scheduled every 1 second, making DS to offer near real-time. Right? So you can schedule the batch job every 1 second, every 5 seconds, or every 10 seconds. So you have a near real-time available from BODS. And if you select this other real-time job type here in the context menu, you will have a real-time replication. You can go into the properties, rename the folder, and likewise. We start here with the batch job. When you click on the batch job, it's going to give you an assignment of the job ID, name underscore job 1. You can also rename this. For example, we want to rename this job as our first data load. So I've given here first data loading here in the job name. And there's certain toolbars that we should be aware of. For example, the toolbar on top and the toolbar on the right hand side and the toolbar here in these cross tabs. Now, from the right hand side toolbar, we will pick up some of these icons. We will not be going into the micro level details of the TS, but we're going to look at from the how we create a job for HANA data loading. So we're going to select the third icon from here, which indicates a data flow. Select and go in here and click in the work area. So what we have here after we clicked onto this vertical toolbar and select the third icon for a data flow, we have this data flow available. So you can have n number of data flows which are interconnecting into each other depending upon the control logic, depending upon the filter condition, and a lot of other business rules. In our example, we will work with a single data flow, and that is data flow 1. We will rename this if required. First data flow 1. Yeah. Okay. So then we double click here into this data flow. Of course, we can connect this to a lot of other data flows, and you can make a workflow likewise. We're going to look at a simple data flow. We're going to enter into this first data flow, and then we will pick up the source target field mapping here in this data flow. How we do it is to use the query transform icon from the vertical toolbar. Where it is located? It's located to the right hand side of the screen. You're going to select the fifth icon, which looks like a butterfly icon here. So you're going to select that, click here on sender, and then you have a query. A query is basically for query mapping between the source and the target. So we require to have a source that gets connected here, and then we require to have a target that gets connected for HANA. Okay. Now the source is picked up from these data store objects that you see here. The ones that are already created are shown here. It's a data store. A data store is a placeholder for all the inbound data coming in from the source. Plus, you can also create target data stores as a placeholder for all the outbound data to be written in the target. So you're going to require 2 data stores, one for the source, one for the target. Then from those data stores, you pick up the tables and map it and then run the data flow. Let's see how we do it. So we're going to pick up a source data store. We're going to select tables from here. Yep. So we're going to select the tables from here and right-click from the tables and then import by name. According to the authorization granted to the developer of the BODS by the BODS administrator, the developer will be able to select table and import it and create the mapping. In our example, let's take up KNA1, Customer Master from ERP. Let's try to import this. Click here on Import. And in this background process, the BODS is trying to connect into the source data store and then get the source KNA1 table from the ERP, pick up the structure, pick up the values, align the data store from the source, and try and bring it here into the BODS designer. It does take some time for the initial configurations. Now, if you're a basis administrator, you're wondering where the connection has been built. We will see those shortly. Okay, so we have the KNA1 table available here, which is imported, and we can also right-click and view data of that table. Again, according to the authorization of the developer given by the administrator, the developer will be able to run and check the values before proceeding any further mapping between source and target. So here we are able to see the customer number 000001 from the US, and likewise we have a quick preview of the table which was imported just now, a few seconds back. So what we do is to reconfirm that the tables consist of the values. Okay, so that check is done. Then we drag this table from the left-hand side data store from the source, drag it across, and drop it into the work area of that data flow. So I'm going to drop it here. And now you have KNA1 from this data store. Now, if you are a basis administrator wondering where connections are being built, we can check those here in the properties of that data store. Okay, so you have these data stores. You can check the properties here. I think the administrator has hidden those. But if you want to create a new connection, whether you have an SAP or a non-SAP source that you want to connect, you can create a new data store as well. This is how you do it. Right-click, new data store. So let's give here new data store 123, and we have options to select the data store type for the source. So whether we want to connect from an adapter connector or a database, or Oracle, PeopleSoft, SAP, Siebel, Sybase, web services, etc. Let's take an example that we want to pick up from a non-SAP database. Let's select the database type, whether we want to connect with the DB2 or Informix or SQL Server, Netezza, Oracle, even HANA, or Sybase, IQ, Teradata, etc. So these are the other non-SAP databases that are available. Of course, SAP HANA is there. If you still want to connect from HANA to another HANA for corporate BI projects, you can do so here with the data stores. So that's how the administrator created the data store for the source, and then we have this available here. And then we picked up the tables from here by importing KNA1. We've also checked the data preview of the KNA1 from the customer master. We're able to see the values have been imported. for a quick check. What we do next is to connect this particular source table. If you can see the small pencil icon being trying to draw a line, you connect it into the query. So we have a source table, we have a connector query. What is missing here is the target table. All right? So for the target table, we go back here to the target data store. Remember, we require 2 data stores, one for the source, one for the target. You see here a target data store, SAP HANA available. How did this got created? Similar step, right-click, new, select, for example here, select HANA, and then provide the version, HANA 1X, provide the server name, for example, IDS, what was the port number, what's the user over here, and then the password, and test the connection, and then proceed to create a connection. It's very simple to create a connection with BODS. But if we are supposed to use SLT, we will have to have an RFC connection created separately, a SQL DBC connections created separately, bring those together, and then go for SLT LTR transaction code with the authorizations, create the schemas, and we do a lot of manual activities. But here it's entirely graphical. All right, so that's how we have a source and a target data stores available. They are temporary placeholders which will be able to bring in the data on the runtime whenever this job is executed. So we bring in the template table here. Now, what is a template table? A template table is a temporary table in the BODS which will copy the structure of the source table which is imported in the BODS and create a permanent table in HANA. Remember, yesterday we've done a small exercise to bring in an Excel flat file loading. Did we create a table every time we have to load? Answer was no. So it was performing replication. Remember, replication. So we replicate everything together, including the structure and the content of the values from the source table. It is always replicate and not simple extract. Replicate will replicate or bring in the carbon copy of the source table structure with the definitions, data types, and then with the values, and create a new table in HANA. Similarly, in SLT, we picked up KNA1 and then KNA1 available in that schema. So we did not create a KNA1 table in HANA. Similarly for KNA2, from the Excel file load, the table was automatically created. Similarly from the bots, from the BODS, we could use a template table to drag and drop it in here. When you drag and drop it in here, it's going to ask you what should be the table name in HANA. All right, so can anybody give me a table name? I think we had the KNA2, if you want to give KNA3, etc. Yep. Okay, so let's go with KNA3. Okay, so what if the table already exists? Then we select the table and not the template table. So we see here our first job is to bring in a new table into HANA. But if the table already exists in HANA, in that case, we go for the table from here. So if you can see on the left-hand side, so there is a table and there is a template table option. So if the table already exists, then we pick up the table and give the table name from HANA. If the table not exists for the first time that we're loading the table, then we select template table. All right. So we're going to give here KNA 3. Let's put here underscore December, or just KNA 3, for example, 3. Click OK. All right. Okay, so if there is a table already, then you also have an option to override or to make another table copy, temporary table. So there are a lot of flexible functions that we can apply here, but by default, it will override. Let's connect these two lines and go here into the query transform by double-clicking. And then we see here the query mapping of the fields. From the left-hand side, we have all of these fields from KNA1 table. Right-hand side is empty as of now. If we were using SLT, please make a note that if we're using SLT, all the fields will be replicated unless you apply a filter within a BAP program to control selective data loading. In BODS, you have a very simple, flexible option that if you only want to load, for example, customer number, country, first name, city, postal code, state, and fax number, that's it. You can selectively load that table fields. So right-click, map the output. So we've picked up customer number, country, first name, city, postal code, state ID, and fax number. And for each one of these mapping, you can also run a function call. Function, for example, to aggregate. Function, for example, to change the data types. Custom functions, database functions, date functions, lookup functions, math functions, etc. These are standard functions. In SLT, we have to create every time about programs have it tested. Plus, you can have a select of that field from, where, function, or domain, or propose a join, group by, order by, advanced likewise. So the mapping can be further flexible here in the BODS, apart from selective data load of the fields. Plus, remember in the Excel we have an option to change the data type. Likewise here, if the fax number need to be a, let's say use an integer, yep, you can select and change the data type. Likewise, if you want to change the description of fax number to telefax number, you can change the field descriptions in here. SLT, we have to run some manual jobs or manual programs to change the descriptions. So with this initial baseline mapping, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we are using 7 fields to be mapped. All right? Out of all of these fields, if you count the KNA1, you'll find at least 125 fields available with custom fields, etc. So out of those 100 fields, we're picking up only 7. So far, good. Let's validate. I'll take up the questions shortly. Let's validate by clicking in here. No errors found. All right, this is the mapping between the source and the target, KNA3. And then let's run the job. Right-click on the first load, right-click, execute. You have to save your program or your job, and then you can also offer some of the parameters for performing that data load. You can trace during the data load. You can check certain global parameter variables, likewise. You go with the default settings and start the job. Again, according to the authorizations, a developer may have the authorization to create a job, and then another senior developer will have the authorization to execute that job. Once the job is executed, then you'll be able to see how many rows are getting sent with a row count. Okay, KNA3. Let's go into the studio. We picked up system schema. As the ERP1 schema is for SLT, we use the system schema here for our practice, for example, for now. Later we will learn how we have our own schemas. So refresh, expand. Let's go here into the tables. We find here KNA3. Let's right-click. And we see the values. Let's count how many fields are in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we have only those 7 fields. If it was SLT, it will become a complex program to just selectively pick up the fields from the table. Now, what happens if a new field is added? Will it throw back an error, or will it just pick up the new field? Let's see. We want to add another new field. So in order to do so, we don't need to drop the table from HANA. We don't need to delete the contents of this table from HANA. We just have to rerun the job from the BODS by adding a new field. So let's go back here into the query mapping. Please navigate using the lower portion of the screen using multiple cross tabs. You can navigate using this option. So the end user reporting team requires a new field. Let's scroll down. Say, for example, they also require a train station of that customer for some reasons. So I'm going to bring it in here, train station, right-click, map to the output. So we now have 8 fields apart from the existing fields that have been replicated. We now have a train station, a new field, been appended here. Validate. Execute a job. Okay. Let's switch over here into HANA. Let's close this. Let's go back to DS. Let's go in here. Okay. Then let's go into HANA Studio. Let's refresh. Let's go into KNA3, open data preview. And what do we see here? We see the new field. That's the train station field. Of course, the value does not exist, but it gives us the new field. Yep, for some values, you're able to see the new fields. If we count, you have 8 fields. Likewise, you can add and remove without writing any complex program or complex coding logic. if you were supposed to use SLT, we have to write those programs. Okay. Now we can add a lot of rules, control logic into the BODS, for which, for further details, I will request you for a separate training program, a separate certification course in the BODS. Now, let's go back here into the data store. For example, in the TechE, this is the ECC data store. We've just used tables. What if we require to bring in from functions, or you have an ABAP program or a function module in the source, or you have hierarchies to be uploaded, you have intermediate iDocs, intermediate documents, or you've got some extractors from SAP. So what you do is just right-click and import extractor, import by name, put your extractor name, for example, to alias, etc. So it gives the rich metadata extractor, whether it is a standard content extractor or a custom extractor built by the functional technical consultant at the source. You can use those extractors which have links with multiple tables and views and functions. And it works. In our example, we've just picked up a table. Please go with dedicated training certification program in the BODS for further details. Okay, let's go back in here into the data flow. Now, if there is a need for any additional connections, let's say you are connecting from ERP KNA1, you want to also bring in another source, you can bring in from these data stores. Or let's go with the cross tabs. You want to call another project, you go here into the projects list. So you have other projects that you can bring in together. So you can drag and drop the project and merge one project with the other. Or you can use other jobs, other batch jobs or real-time jobs that you can bring in here. Or workflows if they're created with the data flows. Or individual data flows, generic data flow. Or if you have any need for any complex conversions or logic, you can write those in here. Or query transform using standard transformation rules for generating the date, effective date, and other details where if you require for filtering, cleansing the data, data quality checks. Other platforms that you want to bring in here to merge map operations, row generating new values, XML, text, other data stores, or even formats that if you want to use. So for example, you want to bring in a flat file format in here along with the KNA1 table from the SAP source, or HDFS from the Hadoop system. So if you want to connect into Hadoop, into HANA, you have to use BODS. Say for example, you want to connect a new HDFS or Hadoop system, you just have to right-click in here, New, and then offer the details of your Hadoop system, type, name, what is the schema that we want to use from the Hadoop, what is the directory from where you want to pick up the file from, and or else other details that are required from the Hadoop HDFS file system. So then you create a HDFS file system, and then you can map it and then bring that here. Likewise, DTDs, server tags, schemas of the XML COBOL, including Excel. Then, if you have to have certain complex custom program, you can create custom functions. Further details, I would encourage you for a separate training and certification. Yep. So in this moment here, we have some custom functions to get the Julian calendar and other validation functions built here. But you can also create your own custom functions if required. If you want to add your own fields by some restrictions, by some calculations and concatenation and splitting those, if you want to add your own field, you can use your custom functions in here. Okay, so this is just a understanding area for using BODS for HANA. There are a lot of other micro-level details in the BODS for which I encourage you for a separate certification course from SAP if you're interested to work in the BODS as an ETL consultant and work with HANA together, for example. Yep. So once we are through with the data loading, we come back here into the HANA and then check the contents and, of course, check the new values been recorded. So we want to see train station, which is a newly added field, count per customer. So from that train stations, how many customers come in, for example. Yep. So train stations per country code, for example. So US based and likewise. Okay. So far so good in bringing in data so far, and let's proceed into our primary agenda for the HANA training, which is to first start with the data modeling. So when you come back here, you'll be able to see certain folders like the backup. This is used for administrative areas to create backup files. We will come back here next week. And then you have catalog with the schemas in here. Now, if you're an administrator basis consultant, you're looking for some policy documents or policy details or policy tables of the HANA system, you can check here public scenarios. For example, what's the password policy of this new HANA system? Check by right-clicking and select Find Password Policy. So it gives us the fuzzy search option, just like in the Google and Bing search. It's called fuzzy search technique. F-U-Z-Z-Y, fuzzy search. So fuzzy search is a technique which is implemented by a lot of search engines. When you start typing the string for searching, it will start giving you the related words or related to search strings. So that's a fuzzy search. It is already embedded, incorporated in HANA for easier search option for the users. So we want to search here password policy. And then we have here the password policy. Whenever you search and open, it will also generate a standard backend select statement from the engine. So the result that we see here is the result from this statement. This is automatically generated by the system. All right? So whenever you work with your new customers or new HANA implementation projects as a security consultant, for example, you want to find out what's the password policy. You have it here. And how many users, who are the users in the system? Right-click Find, type your users. Then you'll be able to see that these users exist in the system. In our example, we have 14 users. Then if you want to find out as a overall administrator, what are the roles that are granted? Who are the grantees? Who are the grantors? And what are the granted objects? Is it further grantable? So you right-click here, Find, type Granted, Granted roles. So you see here the grantee, meaning the recipient user, grantee type, role that has been granted, who is the grantor, and if further grantable or not. So the public synonyms is a public domain area where an administrator can search, find, and analyze some system details. So that's there in the catalog folder, of course, with the schemas. Now, we go here into the content folder where you have multiple packages and views and sub-packages, etc. Okay. The first thing that a HANA application consultant or a HANA developer or a HANA consultant would do is to ensure that your counterpart extraction team has loaded the table for you and you're able to run the reconciliations. A HANA application consultant, in majority of the projects, in majority of the implementation projects, do not have the authorization to perform data loading, unless if it is small-scale projects and POCs or pilot projects. In real-time implementation projects, you will have dedicated extraction team, ETL consultants with the experience of working with data loading, repair, remediation. Therefore, you will have BODS as a separate team to perform the BODS job. Similarly for the SLT. Yep. Now, once the data is loaded, we perform the first phase of the check, which is the reconciliation. I believe some of you have the experience of reconciliation projects. Reconciliation is not a financial reconciliation, it's the data reconciliation for your data cutover as part of a cutover strategy plan that you've implemented for your customer projects. You will have a cutover strategy for data cutover, design cutover, user cutover, reporting cutover. So for the data cutover, you run the reconciliation, check if the expected values are available in HANA as per the business rules and filter conditions. Once the values are available, and how do you check? By going to the schema, pick up the table, open data preview, have your random checks. It's not possible to check all material IDs, but you can have an agreement between customer sponsors, extractor consultants and ETL consultants, and the HANA team separately, so we are all aligned, and then we can take it further for data modeling phase. Reconciliations have to be signed off. Make sure that we all sign off the reconciliation, and then only start proceeding with the data modeling, creating packages and views. Without a sign-off of the reconciliation, we don't want to have surprises at the reporting that, hey, this value is not what we expect. So make sure that for every phase, get a sign-off. Now, once the reconciliation is all okay with the data baseline cut over and you're able to see what your business users expect, and then we proceed with the data modeling. In the data modeling, we work with the content folder. We sometimes go back to the catalog folder once the views are activated. So, first thing here is to create a package. Now, if you click here in the package, it gives us the information that we use this for structuring purposes, just like creating folders and then collecting those folders into the superfolder, likewise maintaining files and subfolders. Likewise, here in HANA Studio, we create packages, we create subpackages, we align the views together. Let's see how we start. Please also write down the steps if required. The first step is to right-click here onto the content folder And then you have a context menu. In this context menu, we will select New. You can also select Find a package, refresh the list, activate those packages, and validate the filter conditions. Filter, if you have a naming standard, for example, in one of my earlier batch, we have October batch, so we had October as a naming standard of our packages. We can filter those package lists with October. We'll see how we do that. But now we want to start fresh with a new package. So we'll select your new package and give a package title or the package technical name. Make sure, and please write down, that all the package names have to be in uppercase. As a HANA trained consultant, your customers and consulting partners expect you to follow some common practice. And the first common practice that we have to remember is the package names have to be in uppercase. Because the lowercase packages are SAP delivered packages. We will learn about HANA Live use case, and we follow up with standard SAP views. So the standard views or standard packages will be all written or given in the lowercase. And the ones that we create are all in uppercase. So this is a good practice. We just don't create any object with any name without following any strategy. So we are trying to align ourselves and prepare ourselves apart from the academics to how to work on project and the expectations thereafter. Package names always in the uppercase, and any objects or views that you create should be always in the uppercase and plus follow a naming standard. In our example, our naming standard is as follows: Z underscore name of the object underscore type if required underscore any prefix if it is required. This is our naming standard for the training program, and it is a common practice by a lot of SAP HANA certified consultants. The consulting firms and SAP will have such kind of naming standards followed in the implementations environment. So we have Z underscore name. Of course, we want to have Z underscore package. And then the name of the package is, let's go with a financial package for supply chain management. Yep. And let's only use supply chain management because it also covers financials. Yep. And then we put an underscore. Want to put the prefix, postfix. We want to put the initials of the user ID. So my name is Param, so put here PR. Likewise, when you create your package, please put an underscore postfix with your initials, so it becomes easier for the support staff and easier to trace if you have any technical difficulties. Yeah. Uppercase with a naming standard. Then description. Description is automatically derived from a technical name. However, you can give your own technical or description. For example, a package for SEM first drive. Just give a description. The next one here says DU, the delivery unit. And the delivery unit is not a mandatory option when you create a package because we don't have a star here. The delivery units are only required if and whenever you are through with the package, meaning if and whenever you have created all the views in the package and you're ready for transports. So when you transport a HANA object We put that in the package, and package is collected together into this unit to deliver to another system. That's why we have a delivery unit option available. And it is optional at this moment. Whenever we are ready with the package for transport, we come back here and assign the DU, which is responsible for delivering that package from dev to QA to production, thereafter go live. For the first step, we leave it blank. Next is the original language. I believe we all understand that this is Unicode, meaning this HANA system understands all the international languages supported in the SAP directory. So by default, it is using the installation language, which is the English. And if you're forming some localization projects, then you may have to translate from English to other languages. That we will see how we do that with other options. So for now, keep it with the default. Then, the person responsible is the user ID in ideal cases. In some of the implementation projects, the restriction could be such that you are only authorized to create a package, and then you assign it to the developer. In those cases, then we pick up the person responsible developer. Ideal cases, we assign it to our own user ID if we are the developer of that package. Then translation. The terminology domain is used for any localization projects, whereby we put the domain of that package. For example, we are indicating here supply chain management, and the supply chain management could be related to the supplier relationship management connecting with the sales and financials, or the SCM could be related to a particular LOB for aerospace and defense, or it could be related to any one of the following domains. So it's also possible to give extra comment to that package through this domain assignment, so that when you're developing the global template in the US and then you're sending it into in Germany or in other countries where there are localization projects, so it gives the extra hint on all about this particular package with the domain, etc. So these are optional settings. Click OK. And then you have here the Z underscore package underscore SCM underscore your name initial. It is empty at the moment right now. If you focus on the icons of these packages, the icons represented here, 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 and here are different than the icons which are represented on these three packages. If you can observe closely. And it means something from a business standpoint. Just like you create a folder within another folder, but the primary folder becomes a super folder, like that. You can have subfolders. So if you have subfolders, then you can basically have a super package assignment in the property of the package. All right? So if you have subfolders in the folder, then the folder becomes the super folder, like a superstructure package. Now, how do you enable that for your custom package? For that, you have to open up the properties of the package. So if you want to see the properties, you go here into the window, show view, show properties, and here we are. Of course, you can drag and drop and put it below, or align this property screen onto the right-hand side, or bring it on top. All those preferences could be set. Okay, or else I have used this particular navigator kind of a toolbar. If you can see, there's a small toolbar right hand side. When you click, it will give you the larger screen of that view. For example, properties. You're going to click here, properties. You see here, properties. So for that package, selected the package and clicked on properties. We see here the name, the description, the DU is not assigned now. We will learn about the transports next week when we are ready with the package. Yep. And then it says here for the structure package is set to no. And it implies that we are using a single package. But if you want to use this package as a super package, we click here on this pencil icon, edit package details, and then go in here into properties and make structural as yes, and click OK. See the change here. A very common interview question. How do you enable a package to a structured package? How do you do it? Why we require? Can you give an example? Yep. So a structured package is a package which will have subfolders, and to enable that, we go into the properties and enable structure to yes, and then we have a special icon that also gives the indication that it is a super package. And examples could be that you have a sales and financials and production together subfolders, which can all be grouped together into supply chain management. Then we are ready to create subfolders or subpackages. Right-click here again and select New from the context menu. We want to have certain subfolders or subpackages. I'm going to select. You see here that's already giving us the technical name of the parent package with a dot, and then you can give your subpackage sub P01. A structured package is always integrated for the development, for consistency, and for the transports. We will learn about the transports in extensive session next week. So we have subpackage 01, and we're going to create another new subpackage 02. The subpackage 01 will be used for our day-to-day sessions, day-to-day exercises and practice and examples. And the subpackage 02 will be used for your self-practice. If you have your own Excel file, if you have other tables, if you want to bring in another table, or if you want to use BODS, you want to upload flat files and create your own designs and views and data models and packages, we do that here in the subpackage. Right? So when you start creating with your practice, you can create a package and then your subpackages likewise. Please practice after the session on how to create this package. And when you come back tomorrow, we will be checking each one of your packages with those two subpackages. Then later we'll be able to apply a filter with package names starting with the Z or Z underscore. Okay, so this is what we have here for tonight. We are now open for questions and answers. I will use the chat box for the questions, and once I'm through, then you can also unmute yourself directly as we are all organizers, and you can also put your questions through the microphones. But first I will take up the questions in the chat box. So let's summarize some point. The SLT versus BODS, SLT only tables. In BODS you have option to bring in ODP, which stands for Operational Data Provisionings. That means you can bring in extractors And then let's put this one here. Extractors, then tables, then hierarchies, iDocs, and functions. Further details, you are advised to go for a separate BODS training. And all fields at one time. But in BODS, you have option for selective fields, like the one that we have practiced today, that you have brought in the first 7 fields and then you added another field and run the job. We don't need to drop the values or delete the table, recreate a table, anything of that sort. We just have to reload or just to run that BODS, and it was able to bring in the new field that is appended. We don't have to apply any complex rules, etc. These are the 2 primary points that is what we have seen. And apart from that, there are other ways. For example, for any complex programming logic, it is quite challenging here in SLT because you have to be an ABAPer in order to work in those complex control logic. And in BODS, it's much easier. You can develop your own custom programs for conversions, have your own calculated fields or restricted fields or filtered fields. Likewise, in the BODS, much easier. Then only SAP sources, yeah, SAP sources. So if you have SAP CRM, SRM, ERP, good. But if you have Teradata, RDBMS, mainframe systems, not good. So SLT is used for SAP sources, whereas BODS is used for both SAP and other non-SAP sources. So if you have an implementation requirement and you're requested to give some assessment about which replicator to be used for that scenario, if you find any non-SAP, go with the BODS. Although SLT is free and BODS is extra. All right. Next. Here we have a support for ABAP programs in SLT. Here we have support of ABAP plus SQL plus any custom functions. So we may be good in other custom functions, but not an ABAP expert, but still we can go with the BODS for control logics and custom coding. So these are some of the primary differences between SLT and BODS replicators. From a licensing perspective, BODS comes with an extra license. But there's a good news for customers. And the good news is when the customers select the type of the HANA Database Software Edition, okay, just hold on, I need to put you on mute. Okay, yep. So when the customer, in the initial stage of the implementation, when the customer selects the HANA DB software edition, there are 3 editions available. Number 1 is the platform edition. The platform edition is for those customers who already have BODS license. This is for those consultants and project managers working with licensing. So if the customer already have a BODS license, then we go with the platform edition for that HANA customer, HANA database software. Number 2 is if the customer does not already have a BODS, then there is Enterprise Edition in the HANA database software, selecting from the SAP accounts team. So do not have BODS, then we have this customer selecting the Enterprise Edition. So when the customer procures the Enterprise Edition, BODS is already part of it, and hence, that's the good news. Customer need not pay extra for BODS separately. It's already included, pre-included in the Enterprise Edition. And then finally, the third one is the Enterprise Extended Edition. The Enterprise Extended Edition is for non-SAP customers, and there SAP has given a option to cherry pick what components to want to have in your basket, in your edition when you want to install HANA database software in your HANA appliance. So for non-SAP, it's completely extended, and then they can cherry pick which one they require, which one they don't require, and SAP will prescribe respective editions, right? So this is an extra information for all of us, not related to the exam, but it could be related with your customer engagement and pre-sales. Okay, so I will look into the chat box first. Okay, so I had questions earlier from Avijit Kumar. What if the table name already exists? Yeah, so we can select the existing table. That was the answer. Will it give an error or overwrite? It will overwrite. What about complex? So I have this question. I'll put it over to the screen. So what about complex programs or conversions that definitely need some logic? Where do I write those? This is a question in the context of the BODS. So in that case, if you have complex conversions or any control logic or any sort of logic, we define that in the custom functions. So you can create your own flow using a BAP or using SQL or using custom functions. Yep, and then create your own function here for those logic. Further details, it will be there in BODS certification course. But for HANA, we're just looking at the area related with HANA from a baseline perspective. Next, can we add further derived fields? The answer is yes. We can add derived fields, derived with calculations, with restrictions, with filter conditions, and transformation rules. Next question was, is it possible to buy SLT license separate to HANA for regular ETL? Answer is yes. So SAP has also opened up because they want to enhance their indigenous replicator of SLT. SLT was built and created only for HANA replication, but today, from 2013, last year onwards, SLT is open for other customers who not implement HANA, but they want to run regular ETL activities. Is now open and available, but there are some limitations. That SLT can only connect to Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2. But if you're using other, let's say, Informix or Teradata or other legacy systems, SLT cannot replicate. So there are some limitations in that regard. If you have Sybase sources, it can still connect, but again, other than that, SLT is not advisable. However, it's available for extra separate instance. Next question so it should be, will DU transport all contents of package? Yes. So for transport, we will learn in detail because we're just beginning to start the understanding of the terminologies and just a few areas of how, where things are done. But transport is a separate session altogether. So we'll learn how we do it, what are the 3 types of transports that are available, which one is recommended, which one is not. What if you have a stack-up server or a single instance? What if you have an enterprise use case? How do you do it? What if you want to bring in RevTrack? What if you want to bring in CTS and SDMS and other solution manager in the landscape? So transport will be a separate session, but the answer for now here is yes. The DU will be able to bring in all of those contents which are part of the package and transport it to the target system. Okay, next question. I think it's from Ali. You got a question, Ali? Ali Tech INC.
Yeah. Sorry, I should change that. It's not my name. It's a company. My site. I apologize.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me. I have just a couple questions. One is regarding yesterday's topic when you were talking about provisioning, and you were talking about SAP BW, SCM, CRM, whatever, which is not part of replication. So in other words, from that, it means that we can bring in the BW models into HANA and integrate with the HANA models and create like a composite model. Is that what it means?
Yeah. And vice versa. A HANA model can be imported into the BW as a transient provider, and that transient provider combines with the existing native BW info providers, and then you can have composite hybrid providers. So both ways is possible, and that is only possible when you run the application server on HANA. CRM, SRM, BW, ERP on HANA DB.
Oh, okay. So is this something, I don't think it's part of this course, right? You will cover BW on HANA, but not to that extent, right?
Not to that extent, but we will try our best in our additional session. So apart from the academics, we have created another additional session which will cover BW on HANA, BPC on BW on HANA through a BAK, and ERP on HANA through HANA Live. And I will be able to show you on the system in the studio where those standard ERP HANA views are located.
Okay. Well, the next question is, when we talk about hot data and cold data, even hot data is basically transaction and cold data is the line item based on a couple of days ago you mentioned. My question is, how long the cold data is persisted, aggregated cold data is persisted in HANA memory? Is there a time limit before it can be archived or whatever?
Yeah. Well, to take up the question, all components in HANA are all in memory. So the hot, which is real time, real time, and the cold, which is the historical, are both stored in memory. So it is in memory DB of HANA in separate compartments. So for an end user or for an administrator, we don't have to run, so no need for archive or no need for manual transfer of hot data into the cold and based on which particular time frame or if there is any standard settings. So no need for all of those manual transfer activities, because all in HANA is all in memory but in separate compartments, and they are located something called as in persistent layer and something called as page management and then plus logger. So these two compartments of the persistence layer will take care of all the real-time data, and then you have a data volume and plus a log volume for the cold data or the historical data. So these are the smaller components of the in-memory, larger in-memory module that it runs this process of storing the data in its particular location. Now, when we come to the question, when and how does the hot data become a cold data? And based on which factor? So to answer that, there are certain drive electronics embedded. So we're going into the mechanical side. So drive electronics construct will have the embedded 3 master embedded programs. They are part of the embedded systems, the drive electronics, and they are as follows. 1, transaction manager, master program. 2, authorization manager, master program. 3, metadata manager, master program. So these 3 master programs are written in operating system language, and they're embedded in the drive electronics, which are part of the in-memory database, and they are used for all the data inbound replication, data processing, and data transfer between the hot and the cold storage in the in-memory module, and authorizations, metadata, standard schemas, and all of the activities which are part of the relational engines are conducted together by these 3 master programs that are embedded in the drive electronics. So as a DBA or as a consultant or as an administrator, we no longer need to run any archiving or data transfer between hot and cold, or something called as in between warm data. So there are no such activities in HANA today, and thereby it reduces the complexity of a database administration. But the question is relevant, and there is some back-end OS level programs that are embedded in the drive electronics of the appliance.
So basically the BW sitting on HANA will never have historical data stored in BW then?
For BW on HANA, yeah. For the BW on HANA, we have 2 compartments. One is a cube, one is the DSO. The cube will have historical, and the DSOs will have the real-time line item details. That's how it runs the data warehousing. Yep. So in BW application server, if you are maintaining both the real-time and the historical, yep. So the real-time, the line item details are uploaded or stored in the DSOs. Active DSO, active table of the DSO, and then further it gets connected into the info cubes where you can maintain historical or complete result set. Back in the DB in HANA, the DSOs with the line item real time are put up in the persistence layer page management, and then the cube with the cold data or historical data are put up in the data volumes and the log volumes in the DB appliance.
Okay. And just last question is, I was looking at the editor, HANA editor, and one thing I noticed, sorry, not editor, studio. One thing I noticed in the license is expiring on the 7th of this month. Hopefully they know about it, because I hope this will not cause any,
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, okay. Because we have renewed this system. We have because this is the last month of the year. So for the complete year training, we have deleted all the other unrequired packages, and then we have put the temporary license, which is where by 7th of December we are trying to refresh the system, and then you'll have a new license available. So that will not interrupt our training program, because we also have another standby system. If this thing fails, we have another to cover it up.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, Param?
Yep, Arpan.
Yeah, Param, I do have a question from BODS. Actually, you have this data store objects from you're choosing this source and the target system, right? Now, in the template part, I had a audio disruption, so I couldn't hear what you have mentioned at the point of time. So you said that you are creating a template of a certain table, right? For example, you have taken the example of KNA1, perhaps. And you are selecting the few of the fields and doing the transactions to put into HANA, to get into the, then you are going to the HANA Studio, and we can see the data for those selected fields, and then appending a field, again executing, again doing this. So has there means in the data store part, what is the option to understand from where we'll select the source field and the target field? And is there any changes in the, what was the, miss, if you can tell me in brief that what was the settings that we can see the data in the HANA DB?
Okay. So in that case, we go into the data services. Yep, if you can see the screen. So the first thing that we were able to perform was to create the folder. Then we had this job, and we had this data flow. And then we started to bring in the source and the target and then map it through the query. Now here, for the data store, a BODS engine requires two placeholders because the BODS engine will not render or store the data permanently because it is a replicator and not a target. So replicator replicates the source data and temporarily put it into the placeholder for the source data store. And for the target data store, it temporarily creates another data store where the outbound data is ready for upload into the target system. So for a BODS, or data services, we have to ensure that we have a data store created for the BODS, for the source, and for the target. That's how it works in the BODS. So that's why we have here two data stores that we wanted to use, was the ECC and then the HANA. If you have options to connect with other data stores as a source, that you can also create by right-clicking in the context menu, selecting new here, and selecting the type of the data store. Let's say if you want to connect to Teradata. All right. So you're going to provide here database, Teradata, version, let's say it's 14. And then you provide the server, let's say DRD1, which is just a temporary name, and then the name of the database, it's Tera, for example, and then the port number used, and then we have T user, Teradata user 555, and the password, whichever is there at that source. So once we run this process to create a new data store, it will use these credentials to connect into that data, the Teradata database source, and then create a source data store, likewise a target data store. So you're going to create another one for target. If, for example, target is HANA, that we pick up here HANA, and then HANA version 1x, the HANA server name, IDS, for example, the user ID, password, and then apply that parameter credentials and create a new data store for HANA. So once these two source and the target data stores are created, then we pick up the source data store and identify the provider. Let's say we want to bring in from a table, so we picked up the table, then we right-click and imported the table. In our example, we picked up KNA1. Later, after the table was imported, then we right-click and checked the data preview of the table, if it has got values or not. That's how we quickly check the source. And then if everything is okay, then we drag this table and dropped it here into the work area. Once the table is available here in the work area, then we use the query transform from the right-hand toolbar and bring that query transform from here, and then we dropped it here, and then we use the target data store, which is in our example tech_HANA, and since the table does not exist in the target HANA for the first time, so we picked up the template table and dropped it here. Or we can use the template table icon from here and drop it and connect these two, and then run the query transform, execute the job. That's how we did the BODS steps of replicating data.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Ram, this is Rao.
Yeah, Rao, go ahead.
This is Andrew.
I have a question for you. Say, for example, if the SAP source systems like ECC or CRM is on HANA, then what is the SLT used for? Because the SLT...
Correct. I got a question. So in those cases, we don't use SLT because the CRM ERP is directly writing into the HANA DB, so we don't need to replicate anymore. So that is another use case where you run the complete ERP on HANA. That use case is called HANA Live use case. In those scenarios, we don't use SLT. But if there is any need for that source system which is not running on HANA, but we require the data in HANA, in those cases, probably we use SLT and BODS.
Thank you. And well, the other question is, you mentioned that the SLTs are available for non-SAP systems like Oracle and all that, right? My understanding is the SLT, the programs behind the SLT are in ABAP, and if they're not for, if they're for non-SAP systems, how that these SLT programs be executed?
Yeah, so the ABAP program is used for the object-oriented programming. However, if you investigate further in the ABAP program, for reading from a table, it runs the SQL command, select star from a table. Even in ABAP, we use select statement. So due to the option to use SQL statement in ABAP, SAP has scaled out beyond SAP source and then allowed the SLT to connect with Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2, although they don't understand ABAP, but they understand SQL. So ABAP runs the OOPS concept for any logic that needs to be applied, but the fetching and writing and update and delete, all of these which are executed at DB at the backend is done through SQL. Therefore, ABAP for SLT works with other non-SAP and DBs because it runs on SQL.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you so much. I mean, and also the last question from you said in the data store in the BOD section, when you define the table, that it comes with the values also, right? And say, for example, if you define a table for transactional data which has millions of records, will it all be brought in at the time of defining the table, or?
No, it will not. No. Okay. So the import that we did for the source data store is just a basic structure and a few lines for testing that if the table is successfully imported or not. So it is around about 1,000 rows per packet when we run the import, but not the multi-million rows. The multi-million rows will be only rendered and replicated once we run the data flow. So in the initial step when you design the source data store and import a table, it only picks up by default 1,000 rows per packet and use it for temporary test, and then when you run the data flow, it runs the complete multi-million rows from the source table.
Thank you so much.
This is Andrew here.
Yep, Andrew.
Yes, my question goes back to yesterday, and this is in regards to the DXC, direct extractor connection, because I'm just thinking about it, I'm trying to place it where it's actually used, because I've had that it can be like the default one where they call the sidecar option, something like that, or the default one. And I'm thinking, would it be right to say that it's used with the applications like CRM on HANA or BW on HANA? Would that be a right motive to say? Oh, in regard to that?
Okay, so to answer that question, I will use the paint, paint here, and let's write down some of those replicator with regards to DXC. The DXC stands for Direct Extractor Connection. Some consultants call it connector. Either way, the DXC was used for all of the SAP source SAP sources. So it could be an ERP, CRM, SRM, likewise. And this was available to customers before the Business Objects Data Services was upgraded to 4.0. It was an interim solution to allow the SAP source extractors. So SLT can only extract tables, but it cannot extract from content extractors of the ERP. For logistics, you have for inventory, again for CRM, SRM, there are standard the BW content extractors, and could be custom extractors built by the functional technical developer at the SAP source. So what about those extractors which are rich in metadata and which is able to connect data from multiple tables? So what is the option to connect and replicate was the question in 2012. In the first half of 2012. By that time, BODS was not evolved enough to bring an extractor provider source data into HANA. BODS at the time was only able to pick up tables and function modules and hierarchies, but not extractors. So during that time, in the first half of 2012, by the second half of 2012, SAP built DXC and to leverage the content and custom extractors from SAP source. Today, the DXC is now part of SAP Data Services, 4X and above. So today, meaning 2013 onwards, and DXC was when you have 2012. So in 2012, DXC was a way to bring in extractor sources, not tables, extractor sources. But now with the upgrade of the BODS through something called as the ODP functionality, Operational Data Provisioning functionality in the data services, 2013 and onwards, DXC is used and embedded and now replaced by data services. So we continue to use an extractor load without picking up individual tables, directly pick up the extractor or custom standard extractors using data services. So when we go back into the system here, into the data services, we are able to see, if the screen is refreshed, yep. So we are able to see here that a source data store can bring in data from function modules, from hierarchies, from iDocs, and you see here ODP objects, they are extractors. Yep. So if you have a standard extractor, import by name, let's say you have 2 alias and underscore XX, so that's the extractor they can bring in, which is now similar concept of the DXC being embedded in the BODS, and DXC is now replaced by BODS 2013-14 onwards. That's a very good question and could be relevant in your consulting.
Thank you.
All right, then let's move on to the chat box if you have further questions. Yep. So I have a question here from Vijit Kumar. Let's copy this. So the next question here is, once initial load is performed, And KNA1 is, can we retire XDB KNA1? Well, this first part of the question requires a confirmation from the business side that whether we want to phase out the KNA1 from the source. It could be due to certain approach where we call it as a side-by-side approach or sidecar approach, that we slowly phase out the XDB KNA1 and then use the KNA1 in HANA, whereby the KNA1 data gets updated from that ERP directly without the replicators. So these are some of the complex ecosystem scenarios that a lot of solution architect will have to consult customers, SAP, and then decide, can we retire? But the answer here for your question depends on the scope of the project. Answer technically, answer is yes, but it requires confirmation and checks. Next part of the question here is, well, we need to set up replications between two DBs still, assume that we have decided to completely migrate to HANA. Not necessary in that case. So if you've already decided to completely migrate to the HANA DB, we don't need to go with the replication any longer, because the DB runs through OSDB migration path, and it will completely bring out all the kernel, all the scripts of the operating system, and the database table spaces with the data from the XDB to the HANA DB, and then you can proceed further. Use cases are as follows: BW on HANA as an example, likewise the other. So earlier, BW was on, let's say, Oracle, and then we performed a OSDB migration from Oracle DB to HANA DB. Then BW reconnects to HANA DB, and then you can phase out the Oracle or XDB in that case. So this is the first application-oriented use case implemented in 2012 itself, and the first customer was Red Bull. Moving on to the next question. Does BODS also connect with SAP, and what's preference to choose SLT? Thumb rule? If source is SAP, then replicator should be SLT. If source is non-SAP, then replicator should be BODS. And if source is a combination of SAP plus non-SAP, then replicator should be ideally BODS. Today we have SAP sources. Tomorrow it could be something else. So is it future-proof to have to run HANA for other non-SAP sources? Answer is yes, and that is possible through BODS replicator. So that's how we have a thumb rule in the industry today. Depending upon the type of the source, the type of the replicator is pre-decided. Next question. Do you think no archive needed for HANA will be a big blow to open text data? Understand the document archiving will still need a content server. First thing here is the generic archive that we run as a part of data center 1 to other data centers, data center N, is still valid for HANA because we have to follow the International Standard Organization for data archival. Data archival in HANA is conducted through multiple nodes, or it could be different clusters of servers, or it could be multiple data centers, same premise or different premise, or maybe onto the cloud. So the answer is still yes, that we run archiving for the data sets, table spaces, to multiple other drives. It could be a XDB that you run the archive, or a tape drive, or optical disks, or maybe to another nodes, or clusters of servers, or the data centers. So because it is part of the International Standard Organization that we have to comply with data archival storage, therefore HANA still runs on that concept. However, in the in-memory, there are certain save points. So let's put this as the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is in HANA. There are save points. Save points, which will be able to run a archive with backup with snapshot. This is a very new technique if you're a data scientist or a database consultant, and you're aware of the compliance that has to be followed, and then you want to run open text data archiving, product portfolio, and content server likewise. So in HANA, there are save points which are divided into three types. One, data save point. Two, log save point. Three, config save point. These save points give a level of archive, not just the open text data archive, but also configurations, change logs, redo logs, and the data which is already pre-existing. So therefore, answer is yes. And if you need more details on this path, you're also free to reach out to me. And this is applicable to everyone. If you put the mouse pointer on my name in the attendees list, you can see the mail ID. You can see my mail ID. Yep. If you put the mouse pointer in the GoToMeeting in the attendees list, you will see Param Trainer, and then you put the mouse there. You see my mail ID. It is param.th.2009@gmail.com. So if you have further questions which can be taken up offline, please do so, and please feel free to send email.
Just one quick question, Param. I'm sorry, just quick before you go. Like you told us in the HANA, when we create those packages, use some convention with our initials. If we want to practice SLT or BODS, with extractors or tables, whatever, in order to not to step on each other, can we just create a package or a data store under our own user ID and give it that, or is there any standard you have?
You're free to create your own objects in your own names, absolutely fine, so that you don't cross over or collide with other objects.
Now this is for SLT and BODS, but in HANA, you already told us we will follow that standard with that whatever the name you gave me ending with the initials, and then creating two sub projects, right? Because I saw some which were people were using tech user 20 or tech user, like in the past somebody have used their own. So which one would you like us to just use the new method you told us today for packaging?
For SLT, we continue to use the ERP1 schema. For BODS, you will be using those two data stores for source and target. And for HANA, you can create your own package, just like the one that you can see here on the screen, Z underscore package underscore SEM underscore your initials.
Okay. But what about, can we create our schema under our user ID and put some tables there
you can,
instead of using EID?
We can do that, but we will learn how to work with our own schemas in later advanced sessions so that we can come back and have our own views or tables in our own schema. But for now, to begin the areas, we will be using ERP1 as a source SLT schema, and we'll be using the system schema, which is a standard. But then later, once we are into the advanced stage, next week, we will be using our own schemas.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, so we are through with the session 3 for tonight. Tomorrow's agenda is to actually start understanding project requirements, project outline. We will take up a scenario, and then we will learn these terminologies, definitions, subtypes, use cases along with the project so that we learn both ways to deliver a project along with working with the mechanical step-by-step on how to create objects in HANA. So with that, we close the session here for tonight. Have a good one, and we're going to connect tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye for now.